And it actually gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. I've been working alongside him in Mastermind Group last year, which has been fabulous. So our next speaker has what has been described as an interesting life story. He's going to share some of his story and the lessons that he's learned with us this evening. Please welcome Graham Frost.
Just a few months after my 17th birthday, I walked out of that door, number 44, with my belongings in 6 plastic carrier bags. It was my parents' home, and I was leaving to go and start a new life. My life, the life that I wanted to have. That was the first time that I was unconscious that I made a heart-shaped decision. Because that decision was totally made with my heart. I walked down that road. As you can see, it's quite a long road. And a few weeks ago, when I went to take these pictures were not taken in 1972. You might be interested to know. 1973 even. I realised how long a walk it had been. And even more striking was the fact that my parents were both walking down the road behind me. Because they didn't want me to go. They were both in tears. I was 17 years of age. I'd never seen my dad cry before. And after that day, I didn't see my mother for 27 years. If you can imagine not seeing the person that brought you into the world for 27 years. Why did I make that decision? What made me decide to walk away? I got to the bottom of the road, turned left, and they still followed me. Down to the railway station, where I got on the train and went away to my new life. But why? What made me make that decision? Well, the truth was, I was born into a fundamentalist Christian cult. And from quite a young age, wasn't really something I was comfortable with. Here's my little family. I don't have many pictures of my family, but you can see there's a little chap in the middle there with a fringe who bears a very slight resemblance to me. When that picture was taken, I was around about 4 years old. It was taken in around about 1960 in the back garden of my parents' house in Essex, where we lived then, and I had my 2 sisters with me. We went to church every night of the week once we were old enough, about 10, 11. You went to church roughly 4 or 5 times on a Sunday. We didn't have radio or television, and we were really restricted as to what books we were allowed to read. So you can imagine it wasn't a whole lot of fun growing up. I was lucky. In some respects, I had 5 male cousins who lived about 1.5 miles away, so I had a family around me. But when I went to school, I wasn't allowed to have friends. And gradually, over the years, I began to think, is this really what I want to do with my life? I saw other people, that people didn't look happy. I thought, is this really the life I want to have for myself? And so over a period, so then when we got to between the age of 4 and 16, and there's a picture, I'm the one in the middle, still with quite a shock of hair. That's my family. We'd grown by that time to, I had 5 siblings. I had 5 siblings. So I didn't have television, you see. So you went to church and you did that. Everybody had big families. So I decided gradually, over a period of, by the time that picture was taken, I can remember that picture being taken when my youngest brother was a baby. I was 16. I pretty much decided that I was going to go, and I was just looking for an opportunity. I started work when I was 16. I left school, started work, gone off and worked with some normal people, and in as much as anyone's normal, but and I got a job in an office. I was an office junior at the age of 16. Before the days of computers, mobile phones, so you had paper and you had the telephone, and that was it. And I used to push paper around for a living and make a few phone calls. And I realised after probably 3 or 4 months of working in this office, I thought, there's nothing wrong with these people, they're okay, you know. And then one day they said to me, would you like to come to the pub with us on a Friday lunchtime? And I was like, oh, I'm not really supposed to do that. Going to the pub was completely forbidden. You know, something terrible would happen to you if you went to the pub. I'd always been brought up to believe. So guess what? I made a heart-shaped decision. I went to the pub. I don't know if anybody else here is sort of round about my generation, but when, in those days, people used to go to the pub on a Friday lunchtime, and not a whole lot of work got done. When you got back to the office, remember those? I don't know anybody else can remember those days. Well, that was one of those kind of places. So yeah, it was good. And I went, and it was in Shoreditch, in Old Street. Everyone knows that part of London. And guess what? I didn't get run over by a bus on the way back to the office. So I thought perhaps all this stuff I've been told all these years about something terrible happening to me if I do these things is actually not true. And that made me more daring, so I went to the pub again on the following Friday, and then gradually met up with some old school friends, started going out. My dad didn't know what to do with me. I became a rebel. So that behind that sofa, the back of that picture there, that's a rebel. I was already doing things that I really wasn't supposed to do. And then one day, some people that I knew that had a pub in the East End of London where that picture was taken, where we'd moved to by then, they invited me to go across to the other side of London to their new pub. And when I got there, they said, have you ever thought of working behind the bar? I was 17, just turned 17. I said, well, I'm not sure that I'm old enough. They said, don't worry about that. This was the 1970s. And so they offered me a job working behind the bar in their pub and living upstairs. So it killed 2 birds with 1 stone, because I managed to get away from a job that by that time I got a bit fed up with working in an office. And I went to work in this pub in West London, a part of West London called Acton. I've been over there fairly recently and it's not there anymore, but anyway, so off I went to this pub. And it was an experience, because it turned out to be one of the roughest pubs in the whole of London. And there would be regular fights. There was a wooden floor, and there were stains on the floor, dark stains on the floor. I remember saying to somebody, what are those dark stains on the floor? They said, you'll find out on Friday night. Sure enough, Friday night came along, and people were fighting, and then they were picking each other up off the floor, going to the bar and buying each other drinks, and it all happened again, time and time again. It was kind of like being in the Wild West. And I thought, what have I done? And then something else happened. Now, does anybody else here have what I call a stupid gland. Yeah? Anybody else willing to put that hand? Who else has got a stupid gland? I'm so glad. No, it's not that one. It's not the one you think. But I had one. I think it lives in your head. And I googled stupid gland when I was writing this talk. And there's nothing on Google about it. So obviously no one's ever done any research into this. So maybe there's some learned research to be done. But within 6 or 8 months of me going to work in this pub, someone came into my life who was a bad influence, and this is where I made a bad decision. You see that building there, you see on the third floor up there's a row of blinds that are all the same colour, can you see that? Less than a year after I'd left home for a better life, I was crawling along those window ledges. I got out of the window of one room, I was going along here to the 2 windows along. Any idea what my quest might have been?
Dog cleaner?
Cat burger.
Absolutely correct. Somebody else had talked me in to getting involved in petty crime. And this person who came into my life said to me, do you know what we could do? He thought he'd invented the perfect crime. I'm sure other people have done it before, maybe since. So we would rent the hotel room there, and we would go in, and in those days you could book into a hotel, you could check in, you didn't have to have a credit card, you just walked in, got a room, they'd show you to the room, you paid when you left. This was 1974, okay? He said if we get out of that window, crawl along 2 rooms, go and then open the window into the other room, go in there, he said there will be travellers' checks in people's suitcases, we can steal them. What he meant was you can steal them. The stupid decision was I said yes. And that's how I ended up having the next big happening in my life. Because we did quite a bit of that kind of thing. And after being caught by the police, at the age of 19, less than 2 years after I'd left home, I found myself a Borstal boy. I was in a young offenders institution for over a year. Fortunately, while I was there, somebody came up to me, one of the officers came up to me, he said, I need to have a chat with you, Frosty. He said, come into my office and sit down. He said, you're not a criminal. He said, we have lads that come in here all the time. He said, we know by the time they've got to us, they're probably going to be criminals for the rest of their lives. He said, you're not like that. He said, you need to make a decision now that you're not coming back in here. Fortunately, I made the decision to listen to him. After just over a year, I went out into the real world again. Somebody else had seen something in me before then, and had actually offered me a job, and I went back in to working behind the bar again. There's another heart-shaped decision I made, was not to be a criminal, not to go down that road. Exciting though it was, even though I don't particularly like heights, believe it or not, I did find it quite exciting for a few months to go and rob hotels for a living. We didn't do anything else, we didn't do anything, we didn't hurt anybody, we just took people's property. Shouldn't have done it, I know that. It was exciting, I don't recommend it. I spent a year, just over a year of my life locked away, not being able to do what I wanted to do. So Borstal was an experience. I don't in some ways regret it because it's made me into the person that I am now. But, decisions. But I'm just going to stop the story there for a minute, because, you know, we talk about, you know, we're in January 2020, there's been this big thing. I don't want to go on about 2020 and all that kind of thing too much, but, you know, we have the opportunity to make decisions now about how our life is going to go forward for 2020 and the years to come, how our businesses are going to go forward, what we are going to do. Can I suggest to you that you all allow your hearts to play some part in that decision? Make some, you know, put your heart into it. All the major decisions I think I've made in my life have something to do with my heart. All the best decisions, all the most interesting things that have ever happened to me have happened to me because I've made decisions with my heart over the course of the last 63 and a half years. I know I don't look it. So what happened next then? So I go back, I come out of Borstal, I go back into the pub business. I worked for the same people for 3 or 4 years, and then I found myself a girlfriend. We were living together in South London. She said to me, Graham, she said, when are you going to get a proper job? I said, well, I've got a proper job. She said, no, you haven't. She said, there's no prospects to it. There's no pension. When you're, what, 22, I think I was at the time. You don't think about pensions when you're 22, do you? Well, I didn't. And so she said to me, I think you should look for a proper job. So I said, well, I've always fancied working on the railway. So she said, well, why don't you do something about it then? Heart-shaped decision number 4 comes along. So I wrote a letter to British Rail, and the only paper we had in the house was pink paper, and I wrote it with a green pen. And that is true as I'm standing. I wish I still had the letter. Now, would you get a job now if you wrote on pink paper with a green pen?
Yes.
Yes. Maybe it would be so off the wall that they give you an interview anyway, I don't know. But I got an interview, and that's how I came to be a steward on British Rail from 1979. So I don't know if anybody remembers the old British Rail steward with the red striped trousers and the bright red jackets. Yeah, Laurie, you would love that uniform. Very out there. And that's what I did. I got this job. It was like nothing I'd ever done before. I travelled the country. And then, after 6 months in that job, I started to feel that something wasn't right with my health. I was getting very tired. I was a young fellow, 22, 23. Didn't feel right. I was falling asleep a lot, losing weight. My partner suggested I went to the doctors. I went to the doctors. The doctor gave me some tablets. Nothing changed. So eventually, my partner took me to the casualty department at the hospital in St George's Hospital in Wandsworth. And I remember going and sitting in the waiting room, wondering what was wrong with me. And they brought several doctors to look at me. You know, I don't know if anybody else has ever been quite ill, and more doctors come and look at you, and they scratch their head, and somebody more senior comes and looks at you. And remember this, I was a young lad, you know, and eventually they said, have you got anybody with you, Mr. Frost? And I said, yes. I said, my girlfriend's out in the waiting room, and I described her, and they went and got her, and they came in and they said, Mr. Frost, you've got a tumour, you've got testicular cancer. I didn't even know you could get testicular cancer when I was 23. It wasn't known about in those days. It wasn't talked about as openly as it is now. But I can remember laying on that bed in the casualty department of that hospital and making a decision and looking into the future from where I was laying and thinking to myself, this isn't going to get me. I'm not going to let this get me. I haven't escaped from a cult and gone through Borstal for this to get me. Now, I'm not saying, I've been told off before for saying that positive thinking can help to cure cancer. It certainly can't do it on its own, and I would not be here today without the National Health Service and the fantastic people who work in the National Health Service and everything they did for me. You know, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that. But I do think that positive thinking does make a difference to any aspect of life. You have to always think about, you know, even every day, no matter how bad a day you have, you can always find something that went well. That's certainly how I live, how I try to live my life. So that was, you know, that was the decision. Fortunately, as you can tell, I'm still here. I'm not a hologram, not yet anyway, and hope to be here for a few more years yet. I could tell you a lot more, but I'd like to bring the story a little bit more up to date, because 3 years ago I made another heart-shaped decision. Well, in fact, I made a heart-shaped decision on the 17th of December last year, because I've recently moved house from Peterborough to Birmingham. That was purely a heart-shaped decision, because I met my partner 3 years ago. She lives in Birmingham, I lived in Peterborough. It made it a bit more practical for me to move, so I've moved. So you know, you never know when you're going to get the opportunity to make a decision with your heart. So let's have a recap. Think about, you know, the biggest decisions you've ever made in your life. Most of us in this room have made a decision at some point to start their own business. I did it. I've done it twice. I've done that twice. I took redundancy from my job on the railway in 2003 and decided, after a few weeks of indecision and weighing things up, to go as a self-employed freelance trader, which I did for 5 years. And then I went back into corporate life again for 5 years. And then I got fed up with having a boss. Again, I think, anybody else who ever got fed up with having a boss? Well, I would say probably the vast majority of us in this room at some point have got fed up with having a boss. And I decided that I wasn't going to work for myself again. Another heart-shaped decision. So, Professional Speaking Association East Midlands. What I want you to take from my talk this evening. First of all, it's never too late to make a decision. It's never too late to change direction. I'm still doing it and I'm in my 60s. It does keep you young. It keeps you on top. Make sure whatever decisions that you're making involve your heart, not just your head. You'll have a much more interesting life. I'm not saying you'll make a lot of money, because I haven't done that yet. But my life has been interesting. And whatever you do, make a decision. I've just made a decision, for example, in the last few weeks to join a paid mastermind group with somebody who's known to a lot of us in the room, a gentleman called David Heiner. I'm starting on Friday and I can't wait to get stuck into that. That was a heart-shaped decision. I got an email from him in November. Are you interested? I didn't even have to think about it. The heart said yes, the head followed very quickly. So remember, involve your heart in your decisions. Make heart-shaped decisions. And it's never too late to change direction. Thank you.